the people who have the highest agency, who are the like doing really cool building things right now, are not going to go to a unicorn. You got to be a decacorn minimum. Like you got to have line of sight to 10, 20, 100 billion and, evaluations. It's so easy to build now, but it's still so hard to sell. And still, and even acquisition, if you can figure out that, the churn is killing companies right now as well. Because if you can't, you get the momentum, but then you've got leaky, holes in your bucket. The water is coming out, your revenue's coming out just as fast as it's coming in. I mean, you're just burning cash, right? So you're never going to reach profitability.
Sorry.
Yeah. To your point on small startups, I was listening to the 20 VC podcast and they were talking about, is it even like the best people, are they even going to go work at a startup that's offering RSUs or tender offers? Because if you're great, you're going to go do your own thing. But then they're also, it's like, they're not even going to go work for $1 billion. Like people who have the highest agency, who are doing really cool shit building things right now, are not going to go to a unicorn. You got to be a decacorn minimum. Like you got to have line of sight to 10, 20, 100 billion and, evaluations. Nobody's going to go work for a 1 billion, a startup, to your point. So it's interesting because there's more startups than ever, right? There's like, because you can build something, but then where are the moats? Like we
Yeah.
always distribution, and we've got a comment on like, so trust is one of the new moats, product velocity, which is exhausting.
Yeah.
So I don't, it's kind of a crazy time to be, but I guess also if you're a startup, you can become profitable within, 12 to 24 months. So, but the VCs always want the 100x return. They don't want a 10x or a 5x.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that, and then to your point, like the high agency, and I think I sent it to you a week or two ago, there was another post this week about it. The YC like second time founder, I think he's in his 40s. It's like, he pushed out Ploy. It's like the marketing AI,
Yeah.
but he was like that's like the whole narrative now is like the 40-year-old entrepreneurs, whereas before, VCs would shun them or they wouldn't get the traction. But now, like anybody with agency, so essentially just can go out there and build it. And that's to your point. So, but there's the agency part, but then it's still like, you got to get revenue, like,
Yeah.
so.
Distribution. You got to get, it's so easy to build now, but it's still so hard to sell. And even acquisition, if you can figure out that, the churn is killing companies right now as well. Because if you can't, you get the momentum, but then you've got leaky, holes in your bucket. The water is coming out, your revenue's coming out just as fast as it's coming in. I mean, you're just burning cash, right? So you're never going to reach profitability. So it's interesting because I think you're talking about the startups kind of in the abstraction layer with this whole, we've done the token maxing. Now there's so much focus on what's the right model. Do we need the frontier? Can we go with the medium complexity, smart model for medium complexity tasks? And, we've talked a lot about OpenRouter. I think you know more than I do, but like that just seems like that's becoming, it surprised me how much more valuable that is today as of like 3 months ago. And before, all of the GLM models coming out as kind of the workers, and then they just make a tool call to the PhD, Opus, or Fable guys when they need help or get stuck, and they perform just as good, if not better, if they're trained on the company's data with like, 20% of the cost. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just with the speed of where things are going, like we have like Claude-in-Slack. I know you asked about that like a week ago. So we integrated it. It's quite fascinating to have like it in Slack now. It jumps into conversations, and I use it as like my uh I'll use it like, hey, people will challenge post or my observation, and then I'll come in and I'll be like, well, Claude, what do you think based on data?
You fucking pull the Twitter, like Ask Rock, or what is it? You can
Yeah.
add something on Twitter.
Yeah. When you're like, yeah, but
What
no,
do you think?
yeah. Yeah. I'll pull them in on like on data, Claude. So where I was going with that though
I
was
didn't
like,
call you an idiot. Claude thinks you're an idiot.
oh, seriously. Yeah. So that's because it's like, sometimes like having a backbone and is exhausting, right? Like, and it, just
Yeah,
like,
you can easily die on that hill. It's yeah.
so, but where I was going with that is like, cause I was thinking about like the open router models, and actually yesterday I was just like bouncing between on a personal project between, Gemini, GPT and Claude. And I was like, man, I should just like spin up like all these into the API and just work off of one interface and just, cause I'm asking it the same question. So I'm like, oh, what do you think about this? Doing the whole, like, and we've talked about that before, where you go and ask each model.
Yep.
Um, so again, like the open router, though, like how defensible is that? Cause I could see like Claude code being able to spin you up your own open router. Like, here's all my API keys based on my spend, and where we want to be in our budget, da, 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 da. Like, based on these type of questions, almost like a customer service agent.
Yeah. So it's a couple points on that. One, I don't really disagree with you, but I also look at it. A buddy of mine who's more in he's a solopreneur, and so he's got his kind of business of one or small. Open router just works for him. He just points it. It's easy to set up, one time and then forget it. At the same time, you've got the enterprises they're more complex, more nuanced. And I don't say that that's not a very compelling point of view, but one thing I was surprised was Bedrock. Amazon Bedrock doesn't have that because, or Azure to that, anybody who's got this catalog of models that are all serverless token based, right? Meaning you don't have to self-host and spin up a GPU. You just pay by what your input output is. Why would there not be another abstraction layer that kind of pseudo evaluates the prompts and then routes it to the right model? And you could turn it on and off. I would think you could throw in guardrails or evals to help you decide. And I know there's some of that in Bedrock, like prompt router. You can do, I think, some of this, but it just seems like it's ripe for, helping customers. No, what's the incentive? They're
Yeah.
going to bill less, but,
Yeah.
it seems like they're in a great position to do it instead of giving that to the open source community.
Right. Yeah. I mean, similar, I guess, to your point, like the savings and the Jassy model of like, we reduce savings, customers end up spending more.
Yeah, yeah. Was it the Javan's paradox kind of thing? So, if you can reduce the token bill, then you're gonna peanut butter tokens on more things. I believe that because I think we're just so early. I think we're still the the longer this goes on, it just seems like we're kind of coming back to the traditional technology, cycle, S curve, adoption, peak of expectation, trough of delusionment, and then plateau of enlightenment, old Gartner. Because it's just, there's so many examples like around the SDR. Let me see if I can pull this up. Just how that kind of was supposed to be. Well, we're going to automate prospecting for free, cheap, cheap, cheap. Let's see, we got this up. Yeah. So I forget the firm here, but essentially they were rolling out this autonomous, sales development rep. What they found is like they were hemorrhaging ARR. They were having like a 78% churn rate at 90 days because the response rate for the AI only, like, oh, let's just destroy, like, lay off all of our SDRs and just have the agents do it, was like 1 to 3% versus a typical like 5 to 12%. And so the cost per like opportunity went from $847 to $2,200 because you automated it. And so the kind of the insight here was you have to architect the process around the human, so the human's at the right decision point. And so the agent helps on the pre and the post, but it doesn't actually replace the work of the human. That's nuanced and can see this. So I was like, fuck yeah, take that AI.
I mean, yeah, where I will say too, like, and going back to like the Claude-in-Slack example is, and to your point, like they're like having the human in the flow. We had a support ticket come in, and one of my support staff like had reached out and was like, oh, should we just like bump up their RPS? And I was like, this doesn't feel like it's, they were getting throttled, TLDR. And I was like, it doesn't feel like they're getting throttled because of the request. There's something going on here because they just shared that this is happening intermittently. Like something's bursting. And so typically we'd have to go and like open a ticket for, engineering and be like, oh, can you pull these Grafana reports? And like, we need to pull the API and see like time wise, like match up when they said they were getting these like, 429s. And we just asked Claude and our Slack as we're going like, hey, can you pull like the, API key for this and tell us like over the last 24 hours at what point the 429s appeared and where they're coming from? And boom, like did it all for us. It was like, oh, it's coming from this address and it's happening in 1 hour increments. So obviously they're programmatically getting hit. And so going back to the customer, like, hey, this isn't us, this is you.
They're just running cron jobs every 90 or 60 minutes or something.
Yeah. And I was like, so this is you guys, not us performant wise. So like, you got to figure out what's going on. They're like, oh my gosh, oh yeah, we got to check. But where I was going with that is like, we would have had to have gone like the whole like support would have had to like open a linear ticket. Hey, engineering, can you pull these dashboards? We need to find out da 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 da. But like Claude-in-Slack was like, yo, let me do this for you real quick. So
How does Claude have access to that data in
it's
Slack?
it's all hooked up to the MCP. So it's hooked up to like
Okay,
Grafana and ClickHouse. And so it can go pull all of that.
very cool. Yeah, I ended up tagging along on a lunch with the peer of mine, and he was talking to his peer at Salesforce. So they're talking about how they could collaborate on the account, drop through marketplace. But one of the interesting topics that came up was how can we like really partner to elevate the, revenue ops, sales ops, GTM ops, like engineering capabilities to really sell more and lower churn with Salesforce. And so it's kind of interesting. It feels like this going headless is almost, and with the LLMs and going headless, it actually may be like the full realization of the CRM brain. And what I mean by that is now you can easily take all the real world context and the data, admin and entry that sales reps hate, automate that and feed it cross systems because a lot of it's unstructured. And actually, Salesforce could truly be the brain of your company now in terms of like for the chief revenue officer and customer success. And so would love to get your thoughts a little bit because I'm still trying to figure out the stack here. But I reached out to one of my peers. I reached out to both my peers for my customers, but I've had one call and it's a little bit like blind leading the blind because they've got really good executive relationships with, let's say, the CFO and the CRO. And we have some, like we have touch points there too, but our strength is in engineering and product. And so the thought is, marketing, field signals. Yeah, we capture those. They go through Marketo, then they land in Salesforce as a qualified lead, and then we do all the pipeline management, quotes cash, all that shit. But like, what about the product-led growth? What about the churn signals? What about like, trying out this new feature and when someone is to reach out to them and upsell them, right? Or, what about the ticket data that's unstructured for customer success and you're a churn risk? Or, so feeding all that back in, and they use some other systems for like knowledge work. And so it's just like, we're trying to figure out, could we do like a 3-day, my idea here was like a 3-day workshop. One is the executive visioning where you get the stakeholders from products, sales. So like CRO, CTO, CPO, for lack of a better term, you put them in the same room. That way you have the doers with the people who like what they want done. And then the next 2 days, we do something called our AI DLC or AI development lifecycle, right? Waterfall, agile, and AI. And then now they can actually go build this new pipeline or data store or integration that pipes it in and take it to production, and at least in a pilot fashion, and deploy it in Salesforce and deploy it into the field. Because I mean, how cool would it be if we could help our customers, just increase their close rate by a couple points or grow their top line 5 extra percentage points by implementing this? And just that would help us elevate our, trust factor with the leadership team. So super curious when you bring all these things up, with how all this works together, the Salesforce stack seems like it's actually, instead of a SaaS apocalypse, it's becoming like the second coming of CRM. We just can't see it yet.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I almost go back to like the Claude or Coworker, whatever you want, like service you're using is the new interface. And yeah, like I think Salesforce is the brain and the heart. And I'm actually meeting with our Salesforce team next week because, I hooked up the MCP but because of the way it works, you have to have a Salesforce account, but they have MuleSoft. That's what I was looking for. All
API
right.
gateway integration layer.
Yeah, sorry, I had to like pull up like our notes. Yeah, so basically I have the MCP set up and I'm able to create magic with mine. Like everything I've ever wanted to do with Salesforce, not needing to go into like create dashboards, like I've built skills for, I built dashboards on. But when I go to share these with the broader team, if they don't have the like read write access or the same account status as me, they pull these dashboards up or these skills and they're like, I don't see anything because nothing comes up. So that's where the MuleSoft is coming into play. And we're going to hopefully get that set up. And basically that'll act as like this main MCP where if you don't have a Salesforce account, you still have the read access and you're able to see what I build or what others build. And then I'll still have my account. And Jason Lemke talked about this a bit where he's like, oh, we eliminated all our Salesforce seats except for 3. And those 3 are for the people who need to actually enter data. So I can go in and I can be like, update this account, create this opportunity, log this call, blah, 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 boom. And I do that, but everybody else just gets the read version. So real quick, where I was going like with the connectors too. So we have like amplitude. So I think I shared this with you where I just built my WBR that's all automated now. So today at the end of the day, before I clock out for the weekend, I go run this week's WBR from, July 6th to end of business, July 10th. And how my WBR, I have it set up. I have it pulling amplitude. I have it pulling ClickHouse. So amplitude for website data, like, hey, how many visitors, unique visitors, any visitors that have domains that are fintech or, target related, like high potential,
Yep.
opportunities, leads. And then ClickHouse, you have all of our revenue data. What was week over week? What's month over month? Are we on track for target? Or, what customers, are growing the fastest this week? Which ones are declining? Flag those so I know where to look. Pull all my Slack messages, draft like observations on all the meeting notes that I shared in Slack. We use Fellow, which is like a transcription service for video. Pull all of that, aggregate that into my narrative. And then boom, spits out like this, like, here's all your, website visitors this week. Growth rate is X for revenue. These are your top rising accounts. These are your, ones that are looking like they're turning. Here's all the meetings and here's your next steps. So where I'm going with that is like Salesforce is also in that, but like Claude is now this like interface and I just run the skill and I have like artifacts built. So artifacts are like dashboards. So I have like a line of sight Salesforce dashboard that refreshes every second that says like, here's your opportunity pipeline, but you could go into Salesforce per se and just create that dashboard. But now there's more narrative attached to the, artifacts. So I'm going to be a bit of a tangent, but yeah, I think you guys will have fun in your session. It's understanding what connectors and all the services they're using and how you bring that into,
Well, I think that's kind of the vision, except that, I think the only thing that's challenging about that, you kind of mentioned the whole, maybe MuleSoft will fix this, the IAM around the things that work for you to be able to scale it up. Because the CRO wants to have a great picture of everything and insight. And so I think, in a small team, you could do these things as like a really experienced, top tier account executive like yourself. You're doing all this, but to do it for, 300 sales reps, things start to break down. It would put not break down. There's just more and more challenges around security and data access and scale and enablement and, different levels of maturity and comfort with those tools. But I like what you're saying. It's kind of interesting, because Quick Desktop is kind of built on the old Quick site, like, and now it's part of the Quick suite. So there is this whole BI element. It's kind of crazy to think about, but one of the challenges I've heard come up from the security leaders of my customers is even if so I have this whole point of view that there's always going to be the haves and the have-nots in terms of experience. So there's never going to be a retail firm or a fintech firm, I shouldn't say fintech, financial services or healthcare firm that's they're best at their domain of healthcare, financial services, retail for a reason, because that's what they focus is, that's where they make their money. They're not going to be a software tech firm. Just like software tech firms are not going to be as good at healthcare, retail, or financial services. So to think that vibe coding is going to democratize for everyone It's not. It's just you're going to have the people that are just moving to the frontier of software development. That's their domain. They're going to be better at that. So, so when you talk to companies that do build software for a living and sell software for a living, even if they're not building their own, let's say, security software, they're building productivity software. There's a nuance there, but it's still in the vein of software domain. One of the challenges that keeps coming up is the IAM principles that you talked about. How do I take something that was vibe coded that worked with that one person's IAM roles and access, and then push it into production and know that it's secure and that the right people only have access to the right data? That's much more challenging. And just to kind of tie it back to something you shared, it was super interesting to see Cloudflare's drop feature. So maybe you could elaborate. You basically upload your vibe coded files and it turns it into like a production app.
Yeah, or like your production site. I think like 2 or 3 weeks before that, I shared with you the one that Stripe did, and not Stripe, Shopify did internally. Like, so they have the internal like one where like, oh, just drop all your, files here and everybody can see it. I think, yeah, so the Cloudflare one is, and I think they give you, it said 60 minutes or maybe 60 seconds. I don't know what, there was a time limit.
60 minutes.
Yeah, where you
get
get
to claim it.
Claim it, yeah. But then that goes back to security too. Like, okay, I'm out of here in an hour before they like ice me. Let me drop all this whole CRM Excel workbook, or
all my
whatever.
customer data, so it's functional.
So I don't know, but yeah, but I mean, I think it's cool. Like they just like they saw like a need for something and probably didn't take much to MVP it, and they're like, let's just ship it.
It's encouraging because you have these companies that are on the forefront of technology, infrastructure, and platform. So, infrastructure, platform, and SaaS as a service. So they're going to be the ones that I think figure this out for the rest of us and kind of turn this into the easy button as everyone's going through this change management, which is kind of interesting because the paradigm, so OpenAI acquired this, like the Technology Business Daily or TBN or something like that network. And so I was listening to them on a podcast with Prof G. It was kind of interesting. They were commenting about OpenAI and Anthropic's strategy around marketing. And it was like they were saying they were fear mongering in order to raise the necessary funds to support the CapEx, to support the trainings, to support the growth. And they felt early on that was the wrong way. Like, where's our Steve Jobs, right? We need to talk about the optimism, the upside, curing cancer. We do not need to be, saying the sky is falling chicken little. And you saw that, now we're seeing the blowback. Data centers, NIMBY, right? Why am I going to, work with it if it's going to take my job, versus China, who's like, yeah, this is for the better good. The government is looking out after us. So I thought that was super interesting, like maybe insight to now the whole marketing shifted, right? Like now OpenAI is saying, that's not going to take all jobs. And you see it in reality though, as well. Like I sent you that link and I have a little slide here on the Amazon one. Amazon announced the $1 billion in forward deployed engineers, and everybody's kind of following the Palantir model, but I think, was it 9 billion in total if you add up Anthropic's joint venture, OpenAI's joint venture, Amazon's 1 billion, Microsoft announced 2.5 billion and 6,000 people, 2 days after Amazon. I think there's more. What this says to me is that the adoption is not as fast as they want or they think, and companies can't figure it out themselves. And so now we're back to throwing human bodies at a problem to drive the technology adoption, which is always the challenge. Is people don't like change or they're not good at it. Change management is the hardest thing. And so all of the organization around how do you use it, just like electricity back in the early 1900s.
Yeah. I'm curious on this when you sent it to, like, for me, it almost feels like AWS was like just late to jump on the marketing bandwagon, because in my mind, and people can correct me from, the FDE is just like rebranded ProServe. I mean, right?
You take that back.
So they should have like
the groundbreaking shit, Doom. It's a whole new job category. These people are aliens that dropped in that know new shit we don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think they missed the opportunity early on. Like as soon as that became like the zeitgeist, like FDE, like AWS should have been like, we just deployed, our FDEs. And it was just like, just say now pro service FDE.
Yeah, I don't disagree too much with you. I think it comes down to a little bit of semantics and, a little bit, it depends on what side of the coin you want to argue, which is like,
Yeah.
easily talking past or the same or points. But for me, if you look at an FDE as it was quote unquote intended, like a true forward deployed engineer, is actually someone who's an extension of the development team working on site with the client, building features that then get incorporated back to the product. That's an FDE. If your features are not making it back into the product, that's not an FDE. So yes, I 100% agree. These are just consultants that are going to be implementing systems for the fucking enterprise. Like that's my read on it. I don't see these people like, making changes that make it back into Microsoft any more than it's like a product feature request that's documented that goes to a list, and then, the product owners look at the list, how many customers, what's the revenue upside, and then they decide their roadmap features. So
Yeah.
yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's, I, it's not. I think there are real FDEs out there. I don't think this is them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, mine was more just like a knock on like where ProServe exists already. People could have just quickly like jumped on that marketing, like if they wanted early on and been like, oh, FDEs, yes, we have them. Like real quick, take a step back to the Cloudflare one though. On that too, I haven't like looked into it too much, but when people are vibe coding, and I have to look at the service that Cloudflare offers, but I often think of like CloudFormation or like Beanstalk with AWS, like the information or infrastructure as a service and platform as a
You're going way back to Beanstalk. What is Beanstalk again? I forgot.
that was platform as a service, basically.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
well, where I'm going, so like if I go and vibe code something in Replit, like
Yeah.
it's tell me like, oh, you need like this, your Postgres database, like whatever, like, and if I want to stand this up and have it be in fully production, and let's say I don't have that knowledge to go set up an AWS account with IAM and everything that goes along with it and deploy my first EC2s, is this, I wonder if the CloudFormation is sort of trying to be like, hey, just drag and drop your Replit file here and we'll spin up your databases. And I didn't take a look at it that much, to be honest, but I'm just curious because that would be the ideal like solution for AWS and, Cloudflare to start just being able to like drag and drop your YAML files and you're off to the races.
I mean, this is the AI overview. It's a free zero authentication hosting tool for static websites.
Okay, static. All right.
Yeah. So
Cool.
I think it just gives you a live URL. You can host it, which, to be fair, like you can vibe code with Gemini or Claude, really good website these days, just throw it up there. So
Yeah.
it just, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to wipe it every time you go. It's very difficult to iterate unless like you have a CI/CD pipeline. So it's funny. These things are super cool, but it's just like once you need them to be like in production useful, you need all the scaffolding around them. And so until these providers integrate up and really do that, take on that, undifferentiated heavy lifting, then we're gonna have a lot of like skunk projects. So.
Do like nice, I don't want to call them dynamic, but interactive, like static websites. Cause I mean, you've done a few and I've done a few, but yeah, like if you're, and I think this is actually perfect because what I've started doing with some of my proposals is I will take a proposal and I'll say, hey, turn this into an interactive HTML site. So like, hey, you can toggle your revenue slider. And it does all that. Yeah. So now, I mean, I could just drop my HTML in there and be like, here, customer, here's your file, but still not secure. So I've been using Vercel for that. Anyways, on a tangent.
No, I mean, it's super relevant. So there's two things. I don't know if we could talk this ramp index. So they did a study on AI's impact on jobs, which is kind of interesting, but there's also Adam GTM came out with this good article. It was AI's barbelling GTM. So essentially on one end of the barbell is headless. So he's like everything, at least in GTM, Salesforce, HubSpot's already going that way, is going to be, so either, you can run agents on the platform or agents can run your platform because it's all interactive. And they'll still have the UI for humans. But the other barbell was taste, which I thought was interesting, right? Because if you look at our asset content creation, if you look at a lot of these websites that are up and people, you can see, like you mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago when we chatted, like your son or friend was like, oh, that was made by AI. You
Yeah.
can see the websites that are made by Claude. You can see the websites that are made by Gemini, unless you're giving really explicit style guides. It's like copy and paste, peanut butter, like, schema. So it's interesting that like it just resonated with me. Like, yes, that because when execution's easy, everything goes to like what is unique, or the differentiation has to go somewhere else. So I think taste and style is one of those. And then it's gonna be interesting, like, how can you orchestrate on top of these headless software platforms?
Yeah, that is interesting. I think the barbell of the style and taste, I think will come in with teams who can put together their style, like their design and style guides. And I mean, for example, Claude has that too, where it's like they have the skill and they say, hey, drop your references or give us references so that when we run the deck skill, we pull from your media kit, and so that it like matches, your colors and whatnot. But yeah, to your point, like whenever I see a new site, and I've seen a handful, I'm like, oh, that's a Claude site. Like that's a Claude
Yeah.
table. Like,
Yeah. It's the design space. I was talking to an ISV partner, and I won't name the name, but they're they're seeing more competition from Google just with Google Slides and the design aspects of it, which I thought was really interesting because it's kind of the old Google, they make whatever 90% of their money from advertising and they just bundle the rest of it. Maybe it's like 80% now with GCP and Google, productivity apps, but they could just kind of bundle in Gemini. They can bundle in like the digital asset creation. So it's kind of interesting. Doesn't help with taste, but I feel like productivity apps are always a hard sell. I just felt real bad. I was just like, dude, you could just see the fucking defeat in his eyes and his voice, even though it was on Zoom. I was like, man, I feel so like I wish I could help you more. And he's just grinding it out. And you're just like, yeah, like, well, they won't respond or brand. It's like, the CFO is gonna be like, do we really need this? And it
yeah.
sucks. So, but
Back to the SaaS apocalypse. I mean, if somebody came to me trying to sell that service, I'd be like, wow, I just like, even my engineers are now using Claude for their like all hands presentations. I can tell like they just threw it in 10 minutes before all hands. They're like,
yeah.
right, here's my slides, turn this into a deck. And then it's like, it's those
Yeah.
rounded edges and
It's so real. I don't hate on it. I find sometimes I create a bunch of stuff and never use it because you still have to internalize it and make it yourself and make the connection and distill the information, articulate to your customers. I don't know. And we had a customer, not my customer, but somebody else was saying the feedback from that customer was stop sending me these whatever, 50 updates from the last 2 weeks from the TAM. Like, my environment, tell me what I should give a shit about. Like,
yeah,
use your AI. And it's like people just don't want stuff thrown at them in their face that they have to process. Like, just like nobody likes that, right? Like you show up with a problem, you make it their problem. Like that, you're just outsourcing all the work to them. It's like, no, to go the extra couple steps, which requires effort and energy to like curate and distill. So I'll end with this quote, which I thought was interesting. So the dynamic Elena Verna calls out, and Adam referenced her article, growth is now a trust problem, which I thought was interesting. So when execution commoditizes, the value migrates to what AI can't fake. When we feel it as buyers too, flooded with AI slop. We notice the brands who get it standing out from the noise. My friend Dave said it well, and then I didn't catch that quote, but I thought that was interesting. So as GTM people, inherently, right, people buy from us only if they trust, right? So there needs to be trust at like the marketing level, the brand level, and then the rep level. So I think that's encouraging. That would leave on a positive note is like you still have control of your trust.
yeah. I think there's the old, like for those of us that have done the how to win friends and influence people, like it was like people work with you because they know you, like you, trust you. Like I think those are like the three like pillars that like the Stephen Covey and everybody like used to abide by.
still there. So be likable, be trustworthy,
Yeah.
sell your stuff. So we'll see you next week. Smash subscribe, follow us, like us, all the things. Talk next week.
Do it.